All right, welcome to this explainer. If you think the relentless pressures of the C-suite are some kind of purely modern invention, well, you might want to think again, because as it turns out, human nature hasn't changed a bit in over 2.5 millennia. The ancient Buddhist monks featured in the Dhammapada, they actually face the exact same ego traps, the same focus deficits, and the very same integrity challenges that modern CEOs face today. So today, we're going to treat these ancient parables as actual executive postmortems. We'll be analyzing failed leadership behaviors to uncover some genuinely timeless strategies for success. Here's the roadmap for our executive briefing. 1. Case study on self-pampered leadership. 2. Taming the wandering mind. 3. Theory versus actual practice. And 4. True executive integrity. So let's jump right into case study 1, exploring self-pampered leadership. This first module focuses heavily on the dangers of the leadership ego, specifically that obsession with external corporate trappings over actual inner mastery. Picture this. Our first case study looks at a guy who lived a life completely free from financial worry. After his wife passed away, he decided to leave home and become a monk. But before he even received his ordination, he built himself a custom shelter. And I'm not talking a basic hut. He built a room to store beans, cooking oil, butter, and all sorts of provisions. He built a kitchen where his servants could prepare his favorite dishes. He even brought his own luxury furniture so he could sit and sleep in comfort. In modern terms, this guy demanded the corner office, the private jet, and the executive chef on day one, completely missing the point of the simple, ascetic lifestyle he was supposed to be adopting. So naturally, the other monks see this luxurious behavior and they report him. The Buddha sends for this rich monk and basically asks, "Haven't I been teaching you to live this simple life? Why did you bring all this stuff?" Now, instead of reflecting on that feedback, the wealthy monk throws a complete tantrum. He actually takes off his upper robe, throws it to the ground, and stands there half naked in front of the Buddha. He smirks and dares to challenge him, saying, "Is this how you advise me to live?" This brilliantly proves that his external display, wearing the monk's robe, was just a costume. It was completely masking his internal ignorance and a total lack of emotional regulation. The Buddha severely admonished him, pointing out that throwing a fit and discarding his robe didn't suddenly make him an austere monk. It was his ignorance he needed to discard. The Dhammapada captures this perfectly. It reminds us that whether you're going naked, covering yourself in mud and fasting, or, beautifully dressed with a fancy title, none of it purifies a being who hasn't yet overcome their own ignorance. True leadership is an internal state. You aren't validated by your external appearance, your title, or your expensive office furniture. You are validated by subduing your own mind and conquering that ego. All right, moving on to case study 2, taming the wandering mind. Let's see how this builds into the concept of strategic focus. This brings us right to the modern executive struggle with constant mental distraction. Consider the story of Sangara Rakita. He's a young monk who, one day, offers a newly gifted robe to his uncle, a senior monk he highly respected. But his uncle refuses it, just stating he already had what he needed. Well, Sangara Rakita takes this as a massive, crushing personal affront. Shortly after, on a terribly hot day, his uncle asks him to stay and fan him. Sangara Rakita does the job, but purely out of duty, not respect. And as he's performing this really simple, present-moment task, his mind just completely spirals out of control. It brilliantly illustrates the escalation of a distracted mind. While he's literally just waving a fan, Sangha Rakita imagines a completely fabricated future. He daydreams about disrobing, selling the rejected robe to buy a she-goat. Then he imagines selling the offspring of that goat to get married, then having a son, then bringing the baby to show off to his uncle, and in this crazy daydream, accidentally dropping the baby. He created a whole imaginary catastrophe, getting incredibly worked up, all while he was just supposed to be focusing on the simple execution of fanning his uncle. As verse 37 teaches us, the mind strays far and wide, alone and bodiless. But a leader who actually subdues this wandering mind is freed from the bonds of temptation and distraction. The executive takeaway here is absolutely vital. Stop living in imaginary future catastrophes. Focus on present execution. If your mind is spiraling about a perceived slight from a colleague or some hypothetical future failure, you are completely failing at the actual task right in front of you. Okay, case study 3, theory versus actual practice. We all know there is a massive gap between having theoretical knowledge and actually putting in the operational work. Let's contrast two types of professionals here. On the one hand, we have the scholar monk. Now, he was a proud master of the sacred texts, knew them front to back, but he lacked any real spiritual attainment. He once met a quiet monk and arrogantly planned to embarrass him in front of everyone by asking him trivial, highly technical questions from the scriptures. What the scholar didn't realize was that the quiet monk was an arahat, someone of the absolute highest spiritual attainment. The arahat could barely recite the scripture, sure, but through diligent, actual, daily practice, he had completely eradicated greed, hatred, and delusion from his mind. This brings us to verse 19, which has this absolutely incredible metaphor. It reads, "Though a person recites much of the sacred texts, but is negligent and does not practice, he cannot share the blessings of the holy life, just as a cowherd counting other people's cows cannot taste the milk that comes from them." I mean, think of this as the ultimate warning against being the kind of consultant who only talks theory, counts other people's metrics on a spreadsheet, but never actually tastes the reality of operational execution. Let me give you another perfect example of this failure in practice, a monk named Upananda. He preached incredibly well, sounded great, but acted entirely out of greed. During a retreat, he literally bounced between 4 different monasteries just to hoard a massive collection of new robes. On his way home, he runs into 2 young monks arguing over how to split up 2 robes and 1 very expensive blanket. Upananda steps in to arbitrate the situation. His brilliant solution: he gives 1 basic robe to each young monk and then pockets the luxurious blanket for himself as his fee for solving their dispute. Well, the Buddha severely reprimanded him for this. As verse 158 states, one should first establish oneself in what is proper and then teach others. As an executive, you absolutely cannot demand excellence, strong ethics, or a sacrifice from your team if you're out there hoarding the resources and taking the best blanket for yourself. Your execution and your personal integrity matter infinitely more than your polished corporate rhetoric.
And that brings us to case study 4, true executive integrity.
Finally, we have to look at how leaders behave when resources are incredibly scarce and the pressure is at its absolute highest. This is the postmortem of the great pretenders. During a time of terrible hardship and famine, most monks were struggling just to survive. But one specific group of monks looked incredibly healthy, totally well-fed. When they were questioned, they proudly admitted their clever strategy. They had deliberately misled poor, starving villagers into believing that they were highly attained, magical saints. And because the desperate villagers thought they were holy, they gave these pretender monks their very last bits of food. The Buddha did not praise their cleverness or their growth hacking. Instead, he delivered a completely devastating admonition captured in verse 308. "It is better for one to eat a red-hot lump of iron burning like a flame than to eat alms food offered by the pious if one is without morality." Wow, that is a severe warning. There is a massive karmic and organizational penalty for accepting compensation, extracting bonuses, or trading on trust that you haven't truly earned through ethical action. Faking your metrics just to survive a downturn, it's a catastrophic leadership failure. So let's bring all these threads together into a definitive playbook for the modern C-suite. Number 1, conquer the ego of your title. Don't be that self-pampered monk demanding luxury before you've even done the work. Number 2, anchor your wandering mind. Stop dropping imaginary babies and just focus on the task right in front of you. Number 3, be the arahat, not the scholar. Execute the actual work instead of just reciting the management theory. And number 4, never ever fake your integrity. Taking unearned rewards will eventually burn you from the inside out. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. Take a really hard look at your own leadership foundation today. Are you relying purely on the title of your position to get things done? Or are you actually leading through the undeniable purity and integrity of your daily practice? Thank you so much for joining me for this Executive Explainer. Keep focusing, keep practicing, and I'll see you next time.